Hi everyone, James here. So we're starting to get through these questions now, but I've got quite a few that I think I can answer quite quickly. So let's do the quickfire round. Leon, how did you learn about music publishing and music distribution? What essential things should every music producer know about the music business? The first thing to understand, and I will do a separate video on this, is that there are two main copyrights involved in music. One of them is called the mechanical, and the other, as you mentioned, is called the publishing. And they both exist on a single recording. Now, I learned all of this the hard way by getting contracts presented to me when I was in my early 20s through dance music. And I had to learn the ropes very quickly. I actually went to the Musicians Union that had a very cheap legal department for musicians at the time. And that's when I started to actually go through and read the contracts. There's plenty of example contracts online. And once you start to understand the structure of the contracts and some of the terminology, and Google's amazing at this, you will increase your knowledge and you will always have that knowledge in your brain. And if you're going to put your signature on any legal document, you want to know the full scope of it. So that's the most important thing I would say. Hi James, have you ever used headphones for mixing? And is it possible to get good results using headphones only? The simple answer to that is no. You must use a mixture between monitors and headphones. I absolutely love doing certain things in headphones, for example, checking real bass end, checking stereo position, because with the multitude of plugins that we have now, we can do some crazy things to stereo that you might not be hearing on speakers, but music is really popularly consumed on headphones now, so you've got to get that space right as well. But the actual drivers, if you think about them, are a few centimeters from your eardrums, and your brain, after even a few minutes on headphones, will tire of the transient information going in. So that's when I always say you've got to stop and take them off and flip between them and the speakers. That is the very best possible result. Okay, got a question here from Jonathan. When does digital headroom become important? Does it actually matter in an entirely digital environment, and will simply turning the volume down with a level tool on the master channel suffice for creating headroom? First of all, let's differentiate the two digital systems that are working. When you drop a file onto your computer, chances are it's either 24-bit or 16-bit. When you output a file from your computer, it is 24 or 16-bit, and that has a finite amount of values for each sample within it, okay? So basically, you can consider it like a massive chart from 0 to God knows how many million different values. That is it. Internally, whilst the DAW is working, it will use a system normally known as 32-bit float. And this has about 24 bits of data and then a multiplication factor afterwards. Now, I won't bore you with the maths, but suffice to say that if this is a 24-bit resolution, that distance between my hands, the distance of a 32-bit float is from here to Gatwick Airport. It's huge. So when you're working internally, that kind of maths is ever so useful for plugin developers, for creating mixer algorithms, etc., etc. And that's why it's used inside the DAW. So that means internally, you can actually really push levels like to an extreme and still be able to recover them by pulling faders back down, should anything be clipping. However, that instantly changes the moment you start using plugins, because particularly the analog modeled plugins expect you to be putting information into them at a certain level. So if you're overloading a bus or a master channel or something like that, and then you put one of these plugins in and you overload that analog stage, you will get all this horrible distortion. And that is where the problems lie. So my advice to you when it comes to headroom is learn, and it takes a lot of discipline this, learn carefully how to work in a more quiet manner across all channels and through your buses, and then everything will be easier. We actually did a video some time ago where we hijacked Bob Katz's system that he uses for mastering called K-metering, because it gives you a target that's about -14 down from your digital meters. But the great thing is the metering can then act as a target. And if you work on this through your channels, through your groups and your masters, you build headroom into your production. As long as you don't then smash it into a limiter at the end, then you'll be absolutely fine. So I'll put a link to that in the description. It will use totally free plugins, and it's changed my life dramatically, and hopefully it will really help you out. One more thing about when we talk about headroom, sometimes this gets confused with limiting and dynamic range suppression, which is really what limiting does. when you're going to an external mastering engineer, they need as much headroom as possible because headroom is detail. It's up to them to make the damn thing loud and sound great. So please don't smash your mixes into a limiter and then pass that on to a mastering engineer. You've done damage that they can't undo at that stage. An interesting question here that I might have a slightly different response to than you'd imagine. I would like to know how you do fader rides to emphasize a particular instrument or drum part in a track. What is the best way to apply such fader rides? Do you have any special tricks with effects to apply on mixdown? I will deal with effects in a completely separate video, but let's talk about this thing of poking certain things through. This can be absolutely vital in your productions, but the one thing I would say is try and avoid to do all of them on faders. If you can, do it with either other plugins. For example, get a utility plugin from your DAW that will have an output control and automate it there. Now, often with the automation channels, you can actually select a region, put 2 nodes in and then push that bit up. But I've got an even easier solution for you. Sometimes it's really good to bounce your stuff down to audio files if you know that you're confident with it. Now, a lot of you will try to keep everything in MIDI. Honestly, sometimes it's just good to make decisions and move forward. Keep the file saved as a new file name so that you can always get back to the MIDI if you need it. But the moment you're happy with something, make a decision and bounce it down. What's great then is if you wanted to accent just one word on a vocal, you can cut that vocal into a separate region on the track and then raise the gain of that one individual audio clip. So therefore, you're creating these kind of automation bits without any need to do fader moves. The other reason for not putting any automation onto your faders is at some point throughout your production or mix, you are going to want to rebalance the whole track. Normally, I find it's downwards. You've got everything got too hot. You want to grab all of the faders and pull them down. And if you've got automation running on those faders, that cannot be done. So if you automate other things such as even the outputs of EQs have normally got an output control. So automate that, keep the faders free, and then you can rebalance your tracks as you go. Something else might happen. For example, you might put a new string sound in one section and then suddenly the hi-hats need to be pushed up. You may find halfway through the mix or your production something needs to go up, and if you've got fader rides on that too early, it can't be done. So keep everything off the faders and then try this way of working. Now there is another thing. If you do want to keep things MIDI but you still want to poke it through at certain bits, very easy. You have unlimited tracks probably in your DAW. Copy the part and the track and all of its content and then just move whatever's triggering it, whether it be MIDI or an audio file, to a separate track and then turn that one track up. And then you can do that at any point throughout the production. We often forget we have unlimited tracks, but once you get the hang of this workflow, honestly, you'll love it. What is the best way to keep your kick and sub in phase? Is sidechain enough for this? Okay, the very best way to keep your kick and bass in phase is to not tune your kick drum. Okay, the very best way to make sure that your kick and bass don't phase interact in a negative way is to never tune your kick drum to the tonic note, which is sometimes called the root note of your track. Okay, this is turning into one of the most ridiculous pieces of information that has ever gained traction. Now, I'll give you a practical example of the opposite and how it can work. The TR-909 is without doubt the most famous drum machine in club music, and it has appeared on millions of productions, and all of those productions are in every single key you can possibly imagine, and yet it still works. Why is that? Because it is tuned 40 cents away from any of the notes in our Western scales. And do we notice? Sounds fine, doesn't it? Even with its pitch. The thing is, the whole reason anybody says you should tune your kicks to your key is because of harmony. But the trouble is, the only place that a kick drum can interact with a bass line is if the fundamental frequency of that kick is tuned exactly to the fundamental frequency of this. The moment you tune it away, it will not have a negative effect and you don't have to worry about all of this stuff. So please, 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 I am begging you, stop tuning your kicks to the key of your track and everything will be easier. The trick with kicks is simple. Pick a great one for your track and shorten it as much as you possibly can for your given genre. If you go to splice and you have a look around all of the kick drums in hip hop, which, let's face it, has a ton of sub bass in it, you won't find a single damn key on any of their labeling. Maybe they're onto something. Please let go of all of this nonsense. I will explain more in later videos. This is quite an interesting question. I would like to know if people can learn music production, or is it a natural talent to be able to make fire tracks? I'm assuming that's supposed to be a fire emoji. Yes, you 100% can learn it. However, the one thing I would say is appreciation of melody and ability to work with harmony and that kind of thing, that may be something that is passed down through genetic lines. And in my opinion, it's why at any point, particularly in underground music, you have almost two separate music industries that overlap in the middle. You have the highly melodic, and here we can talk about everything from sync music and film, TV, etc., all the way through the complex pop stuff, all the way through the more melodic side of jazz and all of that stuff. Then on the other side, you've got productions and music that is heavily based on rhythm and sound. And you can, I suppose you could talk about everything from techno to music concrete. From all of this, there's always a counter movement that is more to do with the production and the actual sound. And let's suggest maybe that appreciation of melody and ability to work within melodies and harmonies is a genetic trait of which will be spread across the population in different amounts. I would say that's where the two camps kind of come from. However, what's great is we can both appreciate both sides of the music. Now, I know I come from the melodic side, and my mum was really into classical music, so I came through that system, but my dad was into rock and roll, so I had the elements of the rhythm side of it kind of sat in the middle. So I've now definitely become a musician that veers more towards harmony and melody, but it doesn't mean I don't appreciate the others. I love the sound of techno in a big room, for example. It's so awe-inspiring because it's just the sound. So I think the thing is to work out where your head is. What you love is exactly what you should be making. So investigate that. And yes, you can. You certainly can learn everything to do with this. Just make sure that you focus your energy on making great tracks, not getting sidetracked by spending 6 months trying to make a kick drum. Okay, I've got a question here from Thomas who's asking, which screen have I got in the back? This is a BenQ, B-E-N-Q, 4K monitor, and I absolutely love it. It's not exactly their highest spec one, so it's not a graphic design one, but it's good enough for me to edit videos for online here. I wouldn't want to grade a motion picture on it, but it's excellent, and it seems to throw everything that I plug into it it just takes everything that comes into it perfectly. One of the best monitors I've ever owned. Please do go and check them out. Thomas has also asked the difference between the Akai MPCX that I've got behind me and the MPC1. Now, obviously, one of the biggest differences are the amount of controls here. You've got an awful lot more dedicated buttons, a slightly bigger screen, and a better quality screen. I must say that. I have an MPC1 at home, but these Q-Links, having these here, for me, particularly with the development work that I'm doing through the F9 MPC expansions, has been an absolute godsend to have all of this information here, particularly when you're chopping samples. You've only got 4 of these on the MPC1, but I cannot recommend the MPC platform to all of you enough. If you're still watching this and you haven't flipped through, go and get MPC Beats if you don't already have it. It's totally free, and it is an 8-track version of their amazing software, and they haven't taken a single major thing out of it. It's stunning.